So when you turn on the news today, it feels like we're coming apart.
4 protesters were arrested and a number of officers were injured by rocks and bottles.
It feels like the tenor of the conversation is at a breaking point.
We're seeing the same chants, we're seeing the same anger and same pain.
You are going to be the disgusting man you were 20 seconds ago, a minute ago.
Survey after survey has shown that Republicans and Democrats now view each other not simply as wrong, but as malevolent, literally a danger to the Republic.
All of us have fallen into the us versus them trap and have some responsibility to bear.
The problem in the United States is different than we thought. The problem is not that we have too many awful people on the other side who are dumb and mean. The problem is we have too many awesome people on all sides who just don't know each other, don't know how to talk to each other, and have not found a way to work together.
Because of the division we see in society today, we are missing an opportunity to come together, to collaborate, to solve solvable problems. Our Courageous Collaborations initiative is seeking to solve the problem of divisiveness in our society by funding research that studies the roots of intolerance and where the problem actually comes from, as well as supporting social entrepreneurs who have identified the tools that best bridge divides so that we can scale them around the country.
And he was bringing together black and white, rich and poor.
For example, Urban Specialists is giving divided communities a forum for healing. They've brought victims of police brutality together with the families of slain officers to have a dialogue. They're showing that even the most painful differences can be overcome. In the wake of the 2017 tragedy, the After Charlottesville Project is providing tools to help activists protest in peace. They help police control crowds in a more safe and respectful way. By uniting with the Anti-Defamation League and the Center for American Progress, we're committed to expanding tolerance to overcome hate.
How did you feel that day?
The StoryCorps One Small Step program provides a platform for 2 people of different political beliefs or backgrounds to come together and talk to one another, to just really prove that there's dignity inherent in each of us that can be found through dialogue, and to build connections across some of these divides that are dividing our country.
We actually have more in common than you think.
Narrative 4 provides a forum where you can tell another person a story, and then you actually swap with each other, and in the first person, deliver the other's experience in a way that builds empathy across even the deepest divides. Karith Foster is using humor to open up dialogue on college campuses. She helps students create environments where they can not only talk about their differences, but embrace them. It takes courage to step towards diversity and towards difference. Ideas like civil discourse and free expression are fundamental to everything that we're doing as a network and fundamental to solving the problems facing our country today. We must break through the division in this country, and it's only through civil discourse that that will be possible.
I want to start with this video that we just saw that I think encapsulates what many of us in this room see day to day happening in our country. There is divisiveness. There are folks that are just focused on just talking about the problems. But the great thing is that's not happening here. We're talking about opportunities, and we're talking about how we solve these problems. So I will tell you, this is the core reason why I love this group. And I think I can speak for Deion, and one of the reasons why he was attracted to this network is this idea of openness. And this is why we are partnering with so many new courageous collaborators, just like you saw in that video, and that you're going to see over the next couple days here as well. So what is a courageous collaborator? It's someone that has the spirit of openness, someone that's willing to work with anyone to do good, and someone that has the courage to get out of their comfort zone, to work with others that think differently than them. So I can tell you I had my own experiences. I've had several of these experiences getting out of my own comfort zone. And trying to drive some of these collaborations. And I'll tell you, those experiences have transformed the way that I think about things. I think I shared with some of you at the last seminar my first entrance into Silicon Valley, and trying to really think about what opportunities we could have to collaborate around social change and solving some of these biggest problems. And I will tell you, I was skeptical going in. And it's like, how is this really going to work? Are they going to be open to me? And was I going to be open to their ideas as well? But I was absolutely blown away by how much common ground we had. And all it took was bringing down those barriers that I had and barriers that folks that I was interacting with had as well, of those walls that were just unnecessary stereotypes that we had of each other. And going through all that, what made me realize was that we had almost the same core principles. And so that story led me to think about openness in a different way, and plenty of other examples as well, where I feel like openness is so core to our principles of what's going to make us really impact millions of lives. And in that technology example in Silicon Valley, I see so many new opportunities opening, and all it took was really one dinner to start that, at least in that case. So I'm incredibly excited about this. I'll tell you, I'm a music guy. And so I like to quote a Bruce Springsteen line that I think is so relevant to what we're talking about here. And his line is, "You can't start a fire without a spark." You know what I'm talking about? And I look at Deion and Stand Together. And most of you know in this room, Stand Together is focused on eliminating poverty. It's a core objective. I look at what each of them were doing independently and doing great work and improving so many lives, but look at what happened when they came together. That was a spark that really took Stand Together and increased its effectiveness and lit a fire. And that's responsible for lighting the fire in so many more kids and people across this country. You're doing more and more of that all the time. And Deion, we are so thankful for your partnership. We love working with you. Thanks a lot, Deion. We want to hear more.
Okay. Now, let's get this out of the way. I'm picking Tom Brady on Sunday, okay? Let's just get that out of the way, okay? As I glance around this room, I'm trying to find something that ties us together, something that creates a bond, something that creates synergy, excitement, adrenaline, passion, enthusiasm. And I think about time. We're all on time. But oftentimes we take time for granted. That's why I love football. That's why I love some sports. Because we always have a clock in the stadium. Therefore, we know how much time we have left. But in life, we don't. So we start to meander. We start to get complacent. We start to just go with the flow. Not understand it's the most valuable coin that we possess, time. And I'm sick and tired of just going along with it. When we gonna do something? When we gonna start something? When we gonna get up? When we gonna speak up? When we gonna stand up? When we gonna yell? When we gonna scream? When are we gonna provoke change? When are we gonna do it instead of just talking about it? Now, something I've gotten to know Charles and Liz over the years, and the thing that I love, so many things, but one thing I love about them is that they raise their kids really well. What I mean by that is, so often times in a group, collective group like this, which means we're so busy giving people the things we didn't have, and we forget about the things that we did. What about the integrity? What about the love? What about the compassion? And now we're upset with some of our kids because they don't have what we have, or they don't have what we had, because we came up a whole different way. Let's get back to that. You remember once upon a time when you needed sugar, you went across the street and got it from a neighbor? We don't do that anymore. You remember when you needed someone to watch your kid in the neighborhood, if it was a relative, you could do that, but you don't even do that anymore. You remember when you needed the ride for work and you needed someone to take care of you, and they would do that, but we don't do that anymore. When are we going to get back together? When are we going to bond? When are we going to talk to one another? When are you going to meet somebody new at your table? Just get up and walk to the other side and say, how you doing? I'm Deion Sanders. Pleasure to meet you. We don't even do that anymore. My God, I love this network. I love what it stands for. I love who they are because they're what they are, in season, out season, on camera, off camera. They are who they are. This is no trick or treat. It ain't even October. This is real. You're supposed to clap right there. So, all the newcomers, I just challenge you tonight to get in the game. Get off the sideline. You're not a cheerleader. You're not a commentator. You're not a referee. Get in the game and let's provoke change. And the only way we could do it at an enormous rate if we just stand together. If we just stand together. If we just stand together. If we just collectively put all the egos, all the adolescents, all the ethnicity, all the social climates, all the religion, all the race, all the ignorance, the political stances, and let's stand together and provoke change. Who's crazy enough to believe that we can do that?
Many of you know I'm a sweet Texas Southern girl, but I've lived in New York for 15 years. So the New Yorker is going to ask this first question. All right? This is great stuff, right? This gives us the warm fuzzies. This makes us feel good. But for people who may not, be into that or be like, this is rainbows and kittens, what's the real world reality? What are the effects that your work is having on society? How is this actually changing things? Would you elaborate on what you're doing and how it's doing that? Absolutely. Start with you, Dave.
So StoryCorps started 15 years ago. It's a real simple idea. We put a booth in Grand Central Terminal where you can bring anyone who you want to honor and listen to their story. So your grandmother, your dad. You come to this booth, you're met by a facilitator, you go inside, door shuts, and you sit for 40 minutes with your grandmother, facilitators in there, and you just look in her eyes and you ask her questions. And I come from a radio background. You've done some radio yourself. And you know that the microphone gives you the license to ask questions and talk about things you've never talked about before. So almost everybody thinks of it as if I had 40 minutes left to live, what would I say to this person who means so much to me? And at the end of the 40 minutes, you get a copy and another one stays with us and goes to the Library of Congress so your great-great-great-grandkids can get to know your grandmother through her voice and story. So it started as a kind of crazy idea, and we've now had about 500,000 people participate. So it's the largest collection of human voices ever gathered. And we've launched just a couple months ago this new effort. Every one of the 500,000 people who participated really knew and loved each other. And what we wanted to do, given the craziness in the country right now, is put people across the political divides into a booth, strangers, to realize that you don't want that person dead. It's gotten to that point. Mother Teresa used to say, we've forgotten that we belong to each other. And this effort is to remind us that indeed we do. So it's hard to measure the opening of a human heart, right? But we're very, very rigorous about evaluation, and we test everything we do. And our Hippocratic oath is that when you come to a StoryCorps booth, you're going to leave better off than when you came in. And we see everything that you'd hope you'd see in these, we're calling it One Small Step, this new effort. In this, people are less fearful, they're more hopeful, they feel much more connected to the person they talk to. It goes back to what, Chase was saying, that it's impossible to hate someone up close. And that's all this is about. It's not about civil conversation. It's not about finding agreement. It's just about looking someone in the eye and realizing they're a human being.
Excellent, excellent. Senator Lee, you are in the heart of Division Central in politics. I mean, it's like America needs a sandwich and people can't decide if we want mayo or mustard. We got to fight over that. What makes you so hopeful and for the results that can be had?
We actually had a big fight in the Senate not too long ago about mayo. We didn't have this conversation before, I promise.
No, we didn't. You're not joking.
I'm not joking at all. There's a company called Hampton Creek that makes a type of vegan mayonnaise called Just Mayo. And the American Egg Council went after them because apparently you're not allowed to use the word mayo or any of its derivatives if you don't have eggs in your product. So I teamed up with an unlikely ally, but a dear friend and someone who I'm increasingly doing a lot of work with, Senator Cory Booker. Now, we represent very different parts of the country. We come from a very different political philosophy. But he and I both agree the federal government has no business telling you what you may or may not call mayonnaise. Thank you.
Amen.
It's amazing what passes for an applause line as a politician. You know, it stems back from the Greek roots of the word politics. Poly, which means many, and ticks, which are blood-sucking parasites. And
You're going to be opening for me, right, next week?
Yeah.
Pastor Omar, you are doing incredible work in Dallas, and it's spreading throughout the country. What is it that motivates you to I mean, we have so many issues. We have, tens of thousands of people, millions in poverty. We have people addicted to opioids. We have so many issues in this country, yet you've chosen this arena. Why is that?
Well, being the obvious conservative on this panel, I toned it down for you.
He
did. The idea is this, that for the last 20-something years, what I have seen is that violence has become the language of those who are most desperate. And what I realized is that those who are needing a voice and have an inoperable language, they tend to use the one thing they can seem to muster up, and that is the violence or the fierceness of their right now situation. And so I've seen so many individuals that I love transform from being those who could not speak to those who have proper voice. And so when you see it so often, it becomes normal to you that transformation is real. When I saw the video of Anton Luckey earlier today, I remember him coming out of prison. I remember him being the guy who they thought was a blood gang leader. I remember that. That's not foreign to me. And to see him now is unbelievable because I know what transformation looks like up close. So after you see it so many times, you become addicted to the change. And I'm addicted to this change. And then you find individuals, no matter where they are, and say, who can be the one that could help us spread this addiction? And believe me, when I was praying about it, I did not think that was Charles Koch. Believe me, that was not in my thing. But here we are.
Here we are. Here we all are. I love that. As you heard in the introduction, I speak on college campuses across the country, spreading the message of what I've coined inversity. That's because I feel like the word diversity has been hijacked. Inversity is a nod to acknowledging our differences and respecting them, but focusing more on what we have in common, being truly inclusive, and also introspective, understanding your value, your worth, your connection to humanity. Because if you can see that in yourself, you can see it in someone else. And I recently got to speak at Stanford Graduate Business School. I guest lecture there now 5 years in a row. And I had a young Arab woman write a blog after my presentation in which she said something that just blew me away. She said that after hearing my message of uniting people, she reconsidered having a friendship with an Israeli classmate. And she actually started communicating with him, and long story short, they became friends. And we like to think that the work we do is powerful because we have such passion for it, but to see it result in something as awesome as that, I would love to hear one of your stories of something that, just 110% validated why you're doing what you do.
Well, it's interesting because what Pastor Omar said, that idea of it being addictive, right? To see people, just to see the beauty in people, which is inviolable. We see it every day at StoryCorps. I mean, I think of when you said that, I think of, this is a little bit, out of the ordinary, but, you go into the booth. There was a time not too long ago when a woman went into the booth with her mom, and her mom came out of the booth. This is not one small step. This is just a standard StoryCorps interview. And her mom came out and said, I have cancer and I had stopped my chemotherapy, and I'm going back on chemotherapy because, sitting there with her, everything in StoryCorps, reminds people that they matter and they won't be forgotten, and, that you're not alone. So it's those kind of moments, again, that you see over and over and over again. I mean, I think what all of us are doing are just kind of telling truths that are true. It's the basic goodness in people. The facilitators who travel around collecting these stories. We have a booth here, and you'll meet the facilitators, those of you who are going in. We've had hundreds of them who go out essentially collecting the wisdom of humanity. And every one of them, when they come back off the road, if you ask them what they learned, they give some variation of the Anne Frank quote, that people are basically good. And it just is. It just is. And it's addictive to see this.
Senator Lee?
We always think of contrast. The entire Bible is based on the contrast between estrangement and reconciliation. It's opposition, and it's learning how to find good in opposition. I had a transformative moment as a federal prosecutor many years ago when I learned that one of the other prosecutors in my office was handling a case involving a young man who was in his mid-20s, a father of 2 young children, who made some mistakes, who had sold 3 dime bags of marijuana over a 72-hour period to what turned out to be a confidential informant. Because he was alleged to have had a gun on his person at the time, a gun that was neither brandished nor discharged in connection with the offense, and because of the way he was charged, and because of the way our federal sentencing laws intersect, this young man became subject to a minimum mandatory sentence of 55 years. 55 years. I became aware of the case when I was sort of the designated problem solver in the office when somebody had an issue that was likely to come up on appeal. I don't know who decided that this was a good idea, but they brought me the case and asked me to help unravel it. This prosecutor brought me the case right about the time the man was going to be sentenced and said, "What do I do with this?" As if he hadn't thought about it prior to that time, which was stunning. The judge assigned to the case took the unusual step of issuing an opinion disagreeing with the sentence he was about to impose, saying there are rapists, there are murderers, there are terrorists, there are hijackers who do not get this much time in federal prison, and yet I, as a federal judge, have no choice but to impose this sentence. And then he said something that would haunt me for years to come in ways that I didn't understand at the time as a young assistant U.S. attorney. Only Congress can fix this problem. Years later, I found myself sitting on the Senate Judiciary Committee, and those words came back to me, and I knew that I had to do something about it. And I'm proud to call Weldon Angelos my friend, and he is with us tonight. Will you say hello to everyone? Hello, Weldon. When I got to the Senate, I started looking for allies, for colleagues. I teamed up with Dick Durbin, who is a liberal Democrat from Illinois, and I'm never described that way. We ended up working on legislation to deal with this very scenario. And during the years that ensued, there were a lot of ups and downs, mostly downs, but ups along the way. I got to meet Weldon's children, who were by then teenagers. And through a series of miracles that we don't have time to go through tonight, Weldon was released a couple of years ago. When he first came to my office, I extended my hand to shake it, and he gave me a big hug instead. And we were pleased to exchange text messages the day the First Step Act was passed just about a month ago. And Weldon, you're my inspiration for that.
Awesome. Thank you. Pastor Omar.
Well, I'll never forget, I worked in the prison. I was the first gang specialist hired by the state of Texas. And my job was to negotiate rival and gang truce in the prison. Then I would furlough those young men home, and I would negotiate with their counterparts in the streets to say, give them free passage to go back to their communities. I'll never forget. And so I would have to meet with all of the gangs, the Latin Kings, the Folk, the People Nation, the Blood, the Crip, the Black Guerrilla family. It didn't matter. My role was to meet with those gang leaders and then get them to agree to some type of peace agreement. So I'll never forget, I met with the Aryan Nation, the Nazis. And when they started the meeting, you know, because you had to convene them, they said, we hate blacks and we hate this and we hate that. They said, but not you now. We don't hate you. I said, no problem, man. Go ahead. Let's get down to business. And so they went through their speech, and this young guy named JD was their leader. I said, JD, I'm going to mentor you. He said, no. I said, I'm going to mentor you, man, because I see something in you. And I see something beyond your speech. See, rhetoric should not cause us to be fearful of truth, because truth has a way of piercing rhetoric. You just have to be truthful, and it'll demystify those words. So we were talking, and so over the next 7, 8 months, I mentored JD. I got him to denounce the Aryan Nation. His father, who was a much higher rank in that organization, came to me and met with me one-on-one. And I was thinking this was going to be a very awkward meeting, but he came to me and I said, yeah, that's why I thought the same thing. And, but I was prepared. No. But so when he met with me, he looked at me and he gave me a hug and said, thank you for saving my son's life, because I need my son more than he needs this. So that's one of the reasons why I'm very, very, very hopeful, even in situations where people see no hope, because again, when you see it up close and you know how it feels, and you see that truth is somewhere in there, it's not, I said at StoryCorps, I said one time that sometimes you have to be courageous enough to collaborate with your enemies, because the goal is bigger than the role. And so and you have to be very careful of who you are calling enemies, because most time it's misunderstood people that could end up being your best friends. You know, you may not have loved Anton Luckey as a blood, but you can love him as a healer.
Right.
See? So it's when we can peel those layers off so you can see the truth beyond the rhetoric. So those are the things those are the stories, and I have so many, as he was just saying, I have so many instances where I've seen miracles up close to where now I just expect miracles when I talk to them.
There you go. There you go. I love that. Thank you. I love what you said about people automatically thinking that there's an enemy and someone who doesn't agree with them. I had an experience at Oberlin College a few years ago. I was invited to speak by the Young Libertarian and Republican Club. And they put my picture up on posters, about 300 posters all around campus, and under the Ronald Reagan Speaker Series. They weren't poking the bear or anything. And by the time I got there, most of the posters had been ripped down. The president of the club started growing steadily more nervous and concerned, because there was a lot of rumbling on campus that people were coming to demonstrate and to act out and to shout me down. And granted, there were only about 15 people in the club at the time, and the entire auditorium was full of people there to boo and to hiss and to get me to not say what I had to say. But I knew what I had to say, and I knew how important and crucial it was. And I knew that it was more than about this ideology that each person who was there had. It was about bringing people together. And what ended up happening was kind of phenomenal, because I came from a place of love. I came from a place of wanting to get people to understand they really had more in common than they didn't. And by the end of it, I had students not only come up and thank me, who'd come to shout me down, but also asked to join the organization, who they were initially opposed to. And I think it is so powerful what everyone on this stage is doing. And I also understand that sometimes it's not what you say, but how you say it. I think anybody who's married knows that. But how do you say to people who may not agree with the concept, how do you bring them around? What do you say? What is the language you use? I would like all of you to share that.
You know, I was everybody agrees with the concept. You know, when you get down to it, again, it's the proximity to people. You know, I think people just want to be treated with dignity. You know, that's all it is. People want to be listened to. And, you know, I had no idea when StoryCorps started that we'd have people flocking. We have thousands of people on waiting lists to get into this thing. We have tens of thousands of people who want, we can't meet the demand for participating in One Small Step that just started. People want to do this. Again, I think what we see on, you know, 24-hour news, I mean, it's just not real. You know, you know, I was talking at the table about kind of what Twitter does to our brain chemistry, and I think part of the power of One Small Step is that it's the fact that you're sitting with someone and people know their great-great-great-grandkids are going to listen to this. They bring their best angels to the table. So it's the opposite of kind of Twitter when you can shoot off an email. I was thinking my wife made me watch the Roger Stone documentary. And Roger Stone has these rules, and one of his rules is that hate is a more powerful motivator than love. And I think that, you know, it's our job, all of our job now and from here on in to prove that he's wrong.
Amen. Amen.
From this moment forward, I'm going to think of that image, the image that we see all over this resort. Extraordinary, unite to unleash the potential in everyone. It is such a beautiful graphic, and I want to commend whoever took that picture. You've got a woman holding a child, and I don't know whether it's a sunrise or a sunset. I like to think of it as a sunrise. I think everyone can always find a common denominator somewhere. In my culture as a Latter-day Saint, a lot of times you put me in a room with another Mormon, I can find a common ancestor within 10 minutes. My staff in Washington likes to joke that the only way I got elected in Utah is because I have a great-great-grandfather, his name was John D. Lee, who had a lot of kids, and I mean a lot of kids, and I'm related to about half the state. But there's a corollary to that with all of us. You remember the notion of 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon a few years ago. You can find an actor who starred in something else. You don't ever have to go 7 degrees out from Kevin Bacon to find something. I find that at least with fellow Americans, people who are from our country, and the same is generally true even from people from the other side of the world, you can always find a common denominator. People basically are good. People basically want to love and be loved. You've just got to find the right way to find it.
Very good. Agreed.
I think that the way, especially in the world that I've been exposed to, you have to be willing to be vulnerable and not hide, you know, expose yourself, get close enough, you know, be real enough to say, I'm learning from you. See, most people don't want to be treated like victims, and neither do they want to be treated like test animals. They want to be treated as mutual, real quality individuals. And so you have to figure out what is it in them that they can add to you, not just what you are trying to add to them. Because there's a certain pride when you both understand we are trying to figure this out together. And I think that that's the kind of language that causes true connection, because you don't have to hide, you know, you don't have to hide and fake. You can just, you know, in the hood, we say just keep it real.
Keep it real.
And you can really keep it real. That's one of the things, and I want to say this, that's one of the reasons, in all sincerity, why I was so blown away the first time I came to this network, but the first time I had a one-on-one conversation, really it was me, myself and Anton had a conversation with Charles, Chase, and Liz, and others, and Brian, and Evan, and all these guys. When we were talking, they were actively listening and saying, okay, let's figure out where do we find true connection? And that was real. When I heard them talking about the difference between powder cocaine and rock cocaine, which you would never think in a group. Why are you thinking about that? Because it means something to someone. See, it's showing that we're really trying to actively figure out tough problems, and that gives us the right to say, hey, I don't know this part. And then they say, well, can we show you MBM? Let us show you this. And all of these things kind of start making sense. So I think that that's the way we start finding that better way, going forward.
I want to follow up to that. Well, yes, you can applaud. This uniting with anyone to do right, obviously it's a very noble concept, but what do you say to people who wonder if that means compromising their principles or stepping outside of their values or comfort zone? How do you respond to that?
Well, I think that you have to have a certain set of guiding principles, a certain set of rules that you play by, and a certain idea. But when you're saying you're not with anyone, what that means is inside of the context of your agreement has to be, I am willing to search deeper than the surface to figure out where we find those layers of possibility. Because normally they're not surface, you got to go a little deeper. And so I think that then gives you the right to stay where you are. There are certain things that I may not agree with, but there are certain ideas that can come from our disagreement that can cause us to go forward anyway. And that's how you got to live. Now, I didn't learn that here. I learned that from my wife because she don't agree with anything I say, but we still live together in as much peace as possible.
Hashtag marriage.
Yeah.
Yes. So last question. When I speak to students, when I speak at corporations, one of my goals is to get people to care. Like, that's my special sauce. And CARE is an acronym for having conscious empathy, active listening, responsible reactions, and environmental awareness. Yeah. What is your secret sauce, would you say, for what you do?
Well, I want to, can I not answer your question?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You can do it. Listen.
Yeah, because I was thinking and I will answer that, but let me stick it at the end since this is the last question. When you started the conversation, you talked about, this is mushy and the word love has come up here, a lot. But I actually think that this is like, the country we're in an existential crisis here.
Yes.
And democracy can't survive in a swamp of mutual contempt. And what these guys are doing, what we're all trying to do, what you're trying to do here, bringing people together is, I don't know if this country can survive if we despise each other. And that, when you ask the question about what is it that when you're in deep disagreement, you don't have to change your mind about something. You just have to realize that the person you're talking to is a human being, and we're not doing that anymore. That's a big problem. And I think that when you ask what the secret sauce is, the secret sauce for StoryCorps is it's just, we're in the human connection business. It's just that not assuming the worst intentions in other people, and deep listening, and remembering that every life is endlessly valuable, and every story is endlessly valuable, and we're all equal and in this together. And one of the things about StoryCorps, which my communications people hate, is that everything about StoryCorps, the truth is it reminds us we're going to die, right? I mean, that's StoryCorps. Like we are all going to die. And I think it's important to be shaken on the shoulder and reminded, like, this is what's important. Like, life is short. Take every day and really, treat it very seriously and live it. It's not a joke.
Yeah.
Awesome.
A few months ago, I was on a panel with my friend Arthur Brooks from the American Enterprise Institute, and someone was asking a question about how our political discourse can be made better. And of course, there was a lot of mention of the word civility. When it was Arthur's turn to speak, I realized I've been doing it wrong. I'm envisioning the whole thing wrong, because he said, what would you think if you were talking to a friend and you asked about the condition of their marriage? And they said, well, we're fine. We're civil to each other. He said, that's not a good sign. How's your relationship with your children? Well, we're civil. He said, without the concept of love, we will never get to civil, because civil is a front for something else. It's the absence of overt hostility, which is very different than the presence of love. A much simpler way that I sometimes put it when thinking in the political realm, I'm looking for fellow heretics. I myself am a heretic constantly. Within my party, sometimes I'm a heretic. I'm a heretic all the time within the Senate for one reason or another. So I'm looking for fellow heretics. And I remember one time shortly after I arrived in the Senate, my friend and my colleague, Bernie Sanders, with whom I actually have a number of projects we're working on. We passed something under the War Powers Act about a month ago that was fantastic to try to get us out of this unconstitutional civil war in Yemen. Long story, but I'll talk to you later if you want. Bernie and I were doing a TV appearance together, and he was late, rushing in from some other interview or whatever it was. I was already mic'd up. He came rushing into the Russell Rotunda just outside of our offices, getting mic'd up at the last second. And as he walked past me, he said, "I'll do anything to be on TV with a fellow progressive." It reminded me of the fact he's a heretic in his party, I'm a heretic in mine. We are all heretics. When we treat each other as such, realizing that we ourselves are heretics, we can all get along a lot better.
And very simple, I think our secret sauce is we believe in redemption. I think that's what it is. We truly believe that inspired people can inspire people. We believe that no matter what happens to you, you're responsible for what you do for you. We believe in those principles, those ideas, and it doesn't matter where they come from. We are foolish enough to say it works, and we don't yield on that point. We don't yield to excuses. We say this has to work because, as he said earlier, our world depends on it. And when you see too much death consistently with the same type of ideas that promote the death, you don't have time to wonder if you're right. You got to say, I'm right, and if I'm wrong, I'm just going to have to stand my ground, because this has to end at some point, and it's on me. So we take it very seriously, this task that we're called to do.
That is awesome. Thank you. Obviously, this panel is full of amazing, incredible people, as this room is full of amazing, incredible people who all have the desire to do something good to make the world a better place, not just for us personally, but for our children, for people we don't even know. And we may not all agree on things, we may not all see things the same way. That's diversity, and that's not a bad thing. Diversity, though, is also, it's when you invite someone to the dance, right? Inclusion is when you ask them to dance. And this is our dance, and we're including all of you in making this event and making our world a better place. So I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for your time and for your attention and your presence. Thank you. Thank you all very much.